Well, let's bring in Sir Crawford Falconer, who served as the UK's chief trade negotiation advisor as recently as 2024 and joining me now. Sir Crawford, is this a thoroughbred or a pup in your view? Good morning.
Good morning. Look, I think the whole thing is operated on two levels, and there's been confusion. So my take on it is what concretely we've got on steel and autos in terms of minimizing the damage and limiting the pain is a positive thing. No question about that. If you're an auto worker and you're now facing the prospect of being able to sell your vehicles into the US, that's better than what happened before. But it's a narrow deal in that sense. It's fixing a pain that was inflicted on us by the US and not, as you have observed, completely fixing it, because the big deal is still, can you get any tariffs further down? So I think if you'd sold it on that basis and said, this is actually pretty good, nobody else has actually got this yet, we are, as you say, the first cab off the rank, that's accurate as far as steel and autos are concerned. But to then hype it and then to describe that those elements make it a fantastic deal which will transform the economy, I can't buy that. However, and this is the big but, and I don't think it's been clear, probably because of the confusing White House meeting, what the president seemed to be talking about was a next phase where you would actually go on to do a proper big deal. And I think the Secretary of State, Reynolds, was referring to that in an interview I watched last night. That hasn't been communicated very effectively and is very unclear to even somebody like me. So as I say, the first step of that is probably what we got last night. And I sort of say, well, look, what the Americans have done is they've been beating us every day. And now they've agreed that there'll be no beatings at the weekend. So that's an improvement. And nobody else has got off for the weekend other than us. But the real question is there a really big deal there, which is a proper trade agreement? The answer clearly at the moment is not yet. We're promised that might be on the way.
Well, this is meat and drink to you, Sir Crawford. So what would you be looking for as the devil in the detail? Concerns over the farmer sector, concerns over digital service tax? What would it be?
Well, with this deal, it's essentially probably going to allow you to sell 100,000 vehicles into the US, which is not a bad thing, but you're not able to completely freely do that. You're still going to pay 10% on all your exports to the US. Steel you're going to be able to sell, although frankly there's not much steel, it seems to me, around. People have been not paying attention. The steel industry's basically kind of closed down for a while and is a ward of the state, as it were. So I don't think the Americans are particularly threatened by that, but if there's a bit of selling that we can do there, that's positive. And that's really valuable in itself. But so you don't really need to look at the detail. The detail is what is actually written down on the Gov UK website. But the real detail is what has been agreed about what we will do next. Because when Trump and Lutnick and the White House were talking about the US is going to get $5 billion out of this deal, that's manifestly not true on the basis of what we've seen so far. It could be true if you were talking about a comprehensive trade agreement that opened up across the board and started to get rid of those 10% tariffs. Johnny Reynolds said last night that they were still working on that. And I think that needs to be more clearly communicated.
All right, final question. You were the lead negotiator for a trade deal during President Trump's first term. In a sentence, how would you describe dealing with Trump and his team, Sir Crawford?
That was Trump 1. And that was related to the planet that I've lived on most of my life. I think Trump 2 is on a somewhat different planet. Whether it's still in our solar system remains to be seen.
I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Thank you, Sir Crawford Falconer, served as the UK's chief trade negotiation advisor. So at least we don't get beaten up on the weekend. Let's turn to a leading businessman, and they don't get much bigger than John Caudwell, who is an entrepreneur, philanthropist, of course, set up phones for you. Good to have you on, sir. So what will the view of British businessmen and women be to this deal? How would you react to it? Morning, John.
Good morning, Nick. Yes, I think it's clearly a mixed bag, but let's just break it down into a number of components. I think, firstly, is it a good deal under the circumstances? Yes, it's phenomenal. I think the hand that Keir Starmer has played, going over to Trump and being his sycophant and offering him a state visit, has kept the relationship warm and sweet, and I think that's put us in a good place to do this deal. Is it an amazing deal compared to where we were before? Absolutely not. No, I mean, cars were 2.5%, went up to 25% under Trump's tariff war, and now down to 10%. Steel and aluminium went from 0 to 25 and back to 0. Now, that could be a very clever play on Trump's part, or I'm not sure how much steel and aluminium we can produce for him, but given the war between Canada and America, where a lot of the steel and aluminium comes from, he's lost a lot of supply materials there, and now he's gained the supply materials from the UK if we can step up. So, I think the US have played a clever hand as well, but I think we're in the very, very best possible situation that we could be expected to be in. I think there's a bit of concern, of course, about imports into the UK of beef and ethanol from the US agricultural industry, but. And I think tough farming is a tough game in Britain, and the Americans do it on massive scale, and their food hygiene is not very good on the whole. So there's risks there.
Is this, as President Trump seems to characterise it, John, some kind of Brexit bonus?
I think it is a Brexit bonus, as is probably India. But the interesting thing is, I think this is good for Trump because he needs to show the world that these deals, he needs to show his own party that these deals can come off and get away from the madness that's been introduced. And I think the positive for Trump there is that this sets the way maybe to influence other countries to try and do the same. But, what's very obvious from the rhetoric coming out of America is for some reason he's very anti-Europe and the EU. So I think we are in an extremely privileged situation compared to that. And we all know what he said about Canada and China. So, I think we're in the best of a very bad world. And I think Britain's done an amazing job here. So am I very pleased this morning? Yes, I am. But would I have been more pleased before Trump? Yes, I would.
Lastly, noting that you were, I repeat, a prominent Conservative supporter, Kemi Badenoch didn't like the India deal. She doesn't like the US deal. Is this very grown-up politics from the Conservative leader, John?
Oh, I get sick, Nick. I get sick of them playing politics. Why the hell can't we just do the best for Britain and call a spade a spade? The Labour Party have made a lot of mistakes, in my opinion, on the budget. There's a lot of things they could have done differently and should have done differently. There's other things they should have done that they've not done. But, these two deals are historic moments for Britain in the situation that we're in at the moment, and that's all you can judge from.
Have a good weekend. Always good speaking with you. Thanks, John. John Caudwell, entrepreneur, businessman, philanthropist, of course, set up the phones retailer Phones for You. A Brexit bonus, or we've been shafted. There's really no in-between, is there? Which side are you on? I think on this occasion, the Conservatives now are just putting themselves in a corner. They're faintly ludicrous. They didn't want to deal with India. They didn't want this deal with the US. Well, what exactly do you want? We'll look at that.